the music that I grew up with didn't have the boundaries and delineation that it does right now. Back then it was funk, soul, disco, Latin, anything with a break. And we used to, as DJs, have to create the breaks and basically create the actual track from other tracks. There'd be a jazz record that had a funky break, and you take two vinyls and cut it up and create that break. Going into the High School of Art and Design, it was a really interesting period of time because those were the 80s, and that's when graffiti and breakdancing was like the big thing in New York City, and I, got drawn into it. And then art and design was like a nucleus, a hub for creativity, both in the hip hop world and the whole breakdancing and graffiti side of things. So I got into DJing right about the same time that I was breakdancing. By the time I'd gotten to the third year of my high school, I was pretty locked into the architecture program. And then I tried out and wound up going to Pratt Institute, which was a very prestigious school. It's out in Brooklyn, and I was living in Queens, so the train commute was a whole lot of fun in the morning. I used to build these huge models for my architecture class and try to bring that on the train. And I'd say about a good 50% of the time, what came out on the other side of Brooklyn was not what it looked like when I brought it in. Made it kind of challenging. The thing for me was that art has always driven my life in one shape or form or the other. I've always been interested in the expression of being artistic, creating something from nothing, creating a building from just some ideas and shapes. And in terms of music, that also gave me the kind of the way that I construct music, the way I construct my sets. I had friends of mine that were DJs, and one in particular who lived in the neighborhood. And I used to always watch him playing the block parties, and I used to say, hey, you know what, I'd love to be up there kind of making people dance. And that's really what got me interested in the whole art of DJing. I was paying attention to the records and buying the vinyl, but then listening to the guys over the weekend. It was religious to listen to Tony Humphries on the weekends on his mix. And that's where I really started kind of developing the vibe of what house music really, meant to me. And when I would go out and check out guys like Frankie Knuckles at The World, it was amazing. And then I also would go to the Paradise Garage at that point in time, and Larry Levan was a major influence in terms of understanding how to work a crowd and how to really work a sound system. The technique that I came up with mixing-wise and DJing came from hip-hop initially. Scratching, all that came from the years of me going to high school breakdancing and checking out old school hip-hop DJs and seeing a lot of battles between DMC scratch champions. And I've always been very technical in terms of how I DJ, and the actual mixing part of it, the blending part of it, came from listening to guys like Frankie Knuckles, like Larry Levan, and just seeing how they layered tracks one over the other, how they transitioned, being able to mix in key to understand the composition of a track. And mind you, at that point in time it was vinyl. You couldn't deconstruct records the way you can now. You had a piece of vinyl, there was a piece of music, you had to understand what you were playing and study it. So, I learned to get really intimate with my tracks and really kind of learn them, go hunting for those white labels that nobody could get. I came up with an imprint called Outer Limits Records, and that's where I met Gladys Pizarro, because Quark Records was in the same building as Strictly Rhythm. And it was great because I would make my trips once a week and go pick up the records, and it'd be like, great, two record labels in a shot. Gladys Pizarro, who was the A&R director for Strictly Rhythm at that point in time, had heard the track and it was making a buzz, and she said, hey, listen, I really like that record you did for Quark, the Outer Limits, the Ego Trip thing. If I put you in the studio, you think you could come up with something? And I was like, sure, why not? she put me into a studio in Midtown Manhattan. And I came out with 2 tracks, which were kind of cool on that trippy, ambient type of vibe. And then I said, you know what? I've got enough time left to make another track. I said, I got an idea in my head. I want to use a sample. I want to come up with something that's, you know, a little bit more dynamic and energy. And that's when I did the record Love Dancing. And I sampled Loose Joints. I took that record, gave it to Gladys. Gladys was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And I don't think any of us knew what that record really meant or what it was going to do. I started getting record companies calling me up saying, hey, I want you to do a remix for us or a project for us. I had already had my own nights. And one of the reasons that record broke as well in New York City is I had my own night, Ego Trip, which had grown from this really small back room. And I literally remember it going from a room of 250 people to a club that was packed with 2,000 to 3,000 people a week. And that's where I broke Love Dancing. And it became kind of one of those records in that era, whereas it was Love Dancing, it was Earth People Dance, Hot Music, Follow Me. There was some serious records that really became what I call the New York 10. 10 records that no matter what party you played in New York, you dropped these 10 records, you were always gonna win. And that's really kind of what kick-started my sound, everything I did from that point on, that Love Dancing record. DJing has become second nature to me. I don't necessarily get nervous before I play every event, but I get excited. It's a very familiar place for me to be in the DJ booth. I've also been able to make a name for myself with a particular sound and expand on it. I started doing 2 different styles for my own production. For instance, why I got known as the S-Man, in addition to doing things as Roger Sanchez. When I was a Billboard reporting DJ, I used to always do these remixes and come up with an extra dub that was a little bit darker, a little bit dirtier, a little bit more underground, because I would do these big vocal productions for these remixes and these productions. But I always wanted something that was a little bit left of field. I started doing productions under the name The S-Man, which were always very left of center, more experimental, which gave me the freedom to break away from doing one thing. I've always been able to express myself in different sounds. DJing-wise, this translated to now me being able to do, in essence, 2 different styles of subgenres of what I do. I've got Roger Sanchez, which is, the sound is always based in Latin rhythms, soul, more vocals. The S-Man is darker, dirtier, grimier. It could be techno, could be deep house, could be anything. It's more experimental, and it's one of the things that I love being able to do now. So that's kind of how the evolution of my sound and me going to play, what that means to me. It all depends on whether I'm the S-Man that night, whether Roger Sanchez comes tonight, and sometimes they go back to back. I look at fame as a byproduct of being able to do what I love. For me, being able to do music, being able to produce music, being able to play music for people, being able to touch people emotionally through my sets, that's been my goal. I've always going to caution people, if you're in for this for fame, it's probably not going to end well. If you're in for it to do what you love and fame happens to be a part of it, then if you learn how to handle that and balance it, that is what makes it worthwhile. The challenge is, if you do become successful, how do you manage your life? For Latins, family is extremely important, and that's one thing that's very prevalent in my life. You know, the heritage that I came up with and having the close-knit family. And it's always been very difficult because for many years I've just found myself adrift in different parts of the world and in different studios. Having family kind of brings the nucleus back home and it anchors you. And it's one of the things that becomes the focus of your life. It needs to become the focus of your life, because as much as I'm a producer and I'm a DJ and I'm a recognized person in that world, I'm actually a husband, I'm actually a father. And I've learned that sometimes needs to take precedence over everything. You know, and it's something that you learn through experience. One of the things I wanted to do is kind of to show people my process. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. And I want to say this is very, very important. What I do may not be the best or may not work for you, but you may find something in it that will work for you. And if you find something in my process that makes life easier for you, makes the creative process flow easier or faster, or clarifies something for you, then I think that that's worth me spending the time here. And together with FaderPro, I love the fact that they've taken this approach to really break things down into its components so people actually understand not only what technically goes into this, but to kind of see a bit of the creative spark, a bit of the way the mind makes connections to achieve and arrive to certain solutions. One thing I've always said, to me, every song is a puzzle. Every song is almost like a mathematical equation or problem that needs to be solved. And there's no only one way to arrive there, but different results can be achieved by different streams of thought, different experimentation. Some things are mistakes, some things are very deliberate. But no matter what, I'm having fun doing it all. And I hope you have fun too.